Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here and 4Ks. And today, our topic of discussion is one Terry Gilliam and his adaptation or his film of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, based on the book by the great Hunter S. Thompson. This is the new 4K UHD version from Criterion. There was also a 4K version last year from Arrow, which I will talk about a little bit later on. But just by way of, what is this movie? If people don't know, I'm just from Criterion's definition. It is 1971, and journalist Raoul Duke barrels towards Las Vegas, accompanied by a trunk full of contraband and his slightly unhinged Samoan attorney, Dr. Gonzo, to cover a motorcycle race. What should be a cut-and-dried journalistic assignment quickly descends into a feverish psychedelic odyssey. Director Terry Gilliam and an all-star cast, headlined by Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro, show no mercy in bringing Hunter S. Thompson's excoriating dissection of the American way of life to the screen, creating a film both hilarious and savage. Yes, so this is a very famous book by a famous, I don't want to say underground writer, because he was beyond that, but sort of a cult writer in Hunter Thompson. And it's a story that, has been trying to be adapted, or has been attempted to be adapted to some filmic version for a long time. In fact, there is even, it's not the same thing, but there was, of course, this movie Where the Buffalo Roam, which is produced and directed by Art Linson, stars Bill Murray as Hunter Thompson and Peter Boyle as Dr. Gonzo, effectively, and definitely has elements of this, but I feel like there's some other writing in there as well. Great soundtrack to this movie. Doesn't fully work. I feel like Fear and Loathing, this movie is more successful, but I do think this is an interesting one and just shows there's a lot of interest in this material. And, just as a history of the production, way back in 1976, apparently Texas Monthly announced that Larry McMurtry, writer of many things, but Last Picture Show being one of them, had signed a contract to write a screenplay for a film adaptation of the book. This is Fear and Loathing. Martin Scorsese, Ralph Bakshi, and Oliver Stone each tried to get the film off the ground, but were unsuccessful and moved on. I did not know that prior to doing a little research for this. Rhino Films apparently began working on a film version as early as 1992, and head of production of the film's producer, Stephen Nemeth, originally wanted Lee Tamahori to direct, but he was unavailable until after January 1997, which was the start date they had. Depp wanted Bruce Robinson to direct. Bruce Robinson, of course, from With Nail and I, How to Get Ahead in Advertising, but With Nail and I being just a seminal cinematic text, another cult film that really lines up with Fear and Loathing and would be a great double bill with Fear and Loathing, actually, if I think about it. Apparently, Bruce Robinson was, quote, unavailable by choice. Now, I don't know what that means. I'd love to find out a little bit more about, if he just didn't want to take on an adaptation of this particular book, or he felt like he might mess it up, or who knows why. Maybe he wanted to do his own stuff at that time. Rhino appealed to Hunter Thompson for an extension on the film rights, but the author and his lawyers denied the extension. Under pressure, Reiner countered by greenlighting the film and hiring Alex Cox to direct within a few days. Alex Cox, of course, writer, director of Repo Man and Sid and Nancy and Straight to Hell, and just a great cult. Would have been a good fit for this probably. But according to Nemeth, Cox could do it for a price, could do it quickly, and get this movie going in 4 months. And then apparently, I don't know what happened between that and this next part, but Rhino hires Terry Gilliam and was granted an extension from Thompson, but only with the stipulation that the director made the film. So apparently, Hunter Thompson was a fan of Terry Gilliam, and it was enough to allow him to give Rhino an extension of those rights. Now, Rhino did not want to commit to Gilliam in case he didn't work out, Thompson remembers. He said, they just kept asking for more time. I got agitated about it because I thought they were trying to put off doing it. So I began to charge them more. I wanted to see the movie done once it got started. The studio threatened to make the film with Alex Cox without Depp and Del Toro. The two actors were upset when producer Leila Nabulsi told them of Rhino's plans, and then Universal Pictures apparently stepped in to distribute the film, and Depp and Gilliam were paid $500,000 each, but the director still did not have a firm deal in place. In retaliation, Depp and Gilliam locked Rhino out of the set during filming. So that's all I know about how it found its way to Universal. And that does sound like a truncated version of what is probably a very complicated story. But, you know, it's a fascinating film, and one that, you know, this book is very important. You know, you look up online just simply what is the meaning behind Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and you get something to the effect of, while Las Vegas is typically associated with excitement and entertainment, the title suggests that the experience of the characters is far from enjoyable. Thompson uses this irony to critique the excesses and disillusionment of the American dream and to comment on the state of the nation during the 1960s and 70s. And he was obviously an author that was in the right place at the right time, was just a very specific and unique voice and a character, just a guy who is unlike almost anybody else in many ways, in his huge appetite for drugs and apparently his need for them. Like there's some, I can't remember if it was an article in the Rolling Stone or somewhere just talking about the amount of drugs he took daily, like to get himself going. Like what your normal cup of coffee would be, his was just this laundry list of various drugs. And I can't remember if that was like a recent, like the 90s, or if that was like during the time of Fear and Loathing or whatever. But it was an interesting thing. And obviously he lived a long time, so clearly it didn't kill him off. But anyway, another summary I found for the movie is Raul Duke, Johnny Depp, and his attorney, Dr. Gonzo, Benicio del Toro, drive a red convertible across the Mojave Desert to Las Vegas with a suitcase full of drugs to cover a motorcycle race. As their consumption of drugs increases at an alarming rate, the Stone duo trash their hotel room and fear legal repercussions. Duke begins to drive back to L.A., but after an odd run-in with a cop, Gary Busey, he returns to Sin City and continues his wild drug binge. I find that a very interesting synopsis. Also, not a synopsis that I feel like you could sell to a studio then or now. You're just like, wait a minute. So they're driving, they go to cover a motorcycle race, they're doing drugs, they wreck their hotel room. What? And then he goes back and does more drugs? Okay, sign me up. You know, it's just one of those where you just don't believe. But obviously the cult power of this book is just one of those things that's just unstoppable. Anyway, it's a fascinating film. It's a film I saw in 1990. Was it 98? Yes, 1998 when it came out in the theater, and it definitely felt like the kind of movie that is trying to emulate what it is like to be on drugs, which I found fascinating. And you hear Gilliam say this time and again, but that he doesn't do these drugs, and I don't know if that means he never done any drugs, including smoking weed or anything. But if that's the case, then it is even more credit to his imagination for coming up with, you know, the paranoid delusions and the stylish meltings of the sets and the things that happen in this film, because it really does feel like somebody who knows the mind of a drug user. But it could also just be he's got an incredibly imaginative and stylish take on filmmaking, which is one of the things I've always loved about him. And okay, so just a more context for Terry Gilliam. So he obviously starts with Monty Python, is doing like animation stuff for them, ends up co-directing, I think, with Terry Jones, the Monty Python and the Holy Grail in 75. He does his solo debut feature with Jabberwocky in 77, which is also on Criterion Blu-ray. Fascinating little film, underrated, I think. Then he does Time Bandits in 1981, and then he follows that up not too far after with Brazil, 1985, which is another movie that you can't believe got made by a studio at all. And truly the Terry Gilliam film, the movie that demonstrates his sense of humor, his sense of style, his sense of fantasy colliding with a quasi-reality. I think Fisher King is another great example of that, as is 12 Monkeys. So I think part of the reason, so he does Baron Munchausen in 88, Fisher King in 91, and 12 Monkeys in 95. 12 Monkeys with Universal, which was a success, I believe, which is part of the reason I think he's allowed to get Fear and Loathing off the ground. But I will say, post Fear and Loathing, and this is not a shot at Terry Gilliam because he's one of my favorites, even from a very young age. When you see Brazil, you're just like, wow, that's not like any other movie I've ever seen, especially if you get to the ending and you're like, oh, wow, okay. But he doesn't do, for me, anything quite as successful following Fear and Loathing. I mean, I haven't seen Zero Theorem. I've heard people say some things about that, but you have Brothers Grimm, Tideland, Dr. Parnassus, Don Quixote, Man Who Killed Don Quixote, stuff like that. And so I feel like this is his last great film for me, and I do think this film is pretty great. I mean, part of it is that cast. I mean, Johnny Depp is like truly out of his mind and doing something truly interesting, even to the point where Johnny Depp himself in the commentary is saying things like, after the first day, he's like, well, I'm going to be fired. I can't, he can't possibly go for what I'm doing, but he does. And I think Depp really sells it. It's one of his best performances. Benicio is fantastic. They're very different, the two of them, but they really come together in an interesting way. Of course, Raoul Duke is sort of an alter ego for Hunter Thompson, and Dr. Gonzo is an alter ego for, real life attorney and activist Oscar Zeta Acosta. And I'll get back to him in a little bit here. But okay, so one of the things that's great about Terry Gilliam for me as a physical media guy is that he has always been somebody who really pays attention to the home video versions of his films when they come out from Laserdisc on up. So he and Criterion, to me, are a match made in heaven, and they have been such from the late 90s or the late 80s or 90s, whenever the Laserdisc came to prominence, and he started doing the Laserdisc box sets for his films, like Brazil. Like, for instance, I worked at a video store circa 2000 called Laser Blazer, and we sold DVDs, but Laserdisc really was the thing. And so even when I started circa 2000, it was late 99, I think, there was still a high demand for the Brazil box set Laserdisc set, and the things that they were doing in that set, and the access that was given by Gilliam to the viewer was really remarkable. And he was one of those first directors that was really on board with a commentary. I mean, I love Terry Gilliam. The man can talk. The man can really talk. And so he is really pretty well suited to a commentary track, and he is the kind of guy who will do commentary tracks on not just the film, but deleted scenes. And in this case, he does, the film's trailer and short films, and just he loves to do that stuff. He loves to get involved, and he loves to help with the making of documentaries and things like that, and really give access to, the process. And I think that's one of the things I've always loved about him, is he is into the process for, self-aggrandizing or not, in a way that allows you to see how a film is made on a lot of levels and hear about the problems that arise during said productions, and I've always enjoyed his commentaries, and I think he's done one on just about all the major films you can think of. But that Brazil DVD box set, I remember that was a groundbreaking thing when I was working at the video store, because it came out during the time I was there, and Criterion was really hitting then with DVD at the time. Now Blu-ray, now they're in 4K. This is 25 years ago, but at the time they were just starting to take off with DVD, and that Brazil DVD set was a hot ticket. You know, it was like 2 or 3 discs, and it had all the stuff from the Laserdisc and more stuff, and now that's on a Blu-ray and hopefully a 4K. I mean, I'm hoping that's coming at some point. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't already. But that said, I love him as a filmmaker who gets involved with the physical releases of his films. And so this is a great set. Now, you know, between what's here and what was on the previous Blu-ray, it's not necessarily going to give you a ton more, but I will say that the 4K looks very good. And in this case, and I'll make a comparison again to the Arrow, the 4K only has the movie and the 3 commentaries, and then we have a Blu-ray which has the commentaries and then all the extras. So they've done what is, you know, seen by physical media collectors traditionally as the good thing in allowing for all the bit rate you can on the 4K and not crowding it with any features. Whereas the Arrow, they went with putting the features on the 4K, which, you know, isn't necessarily a terrible thing. I will say I think I prefer the transfer on this one, on the Criterion, although who could say that they're different? Like, it wouldn't really make sense, but this says 4K digital restoration supervised and approved by director Terry Gilliam. Okay, so that's all that information on that. On the Arrow, it says 4K restoration from the original negative approved by Terry Gilliam. I don't know. Did he approve 2 different scans? Maybe. But the Arrow one felt just slightly more yellow to me or something. I can't put my finger on it. I'm not a great judge of that stuff. They both look good, but watching the Criterion, I think I was a little more struck by that. But anyway, okay. So let's talk about what's included on this disc, right? So, like I said, you have your commentary tracks, and again, you know, Terry Gilliam's not going to have a release with just one commentary. He's going to have 3 commentaries. So in this case, you have one with him alone, and then you have, and he does pretty well by himself actually, and doesn't. Like I said, he's a talker, so I feel like he doesn't leave a lot of blank space. He just and he's a great raconteur, so there's a lot of stories to be told, and a lot of behind the scenes on his creative process. So that's one. And then you have one with actors Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro and producer Leila Nabulsi, which is good and gets, you know, behind the minds of these actors. Again, 2 very different actors that I like very much in their performances here. And a producer who I don't know, but had a lot of interesting insights as well. And then there's another track with Hunter Thompson himself, which is, you know, a little less verbose. It's not quite wall-to-wall, but still interesting to have. So that's all that's on the 4K, right? But then on the Blu-ray, it's broken down into 2. The supplements are broken down into 2 sections, the film and the source. For the film, that section has a few things. I'll go through them here. One called Depp-Thompson Correspondence. Now, this, apparently in preparation for this film, author Hunter Thompson and actor Johnny Depp spent like a great deal of time together, and they maintained like a close relationship throughout the production, and even apparently wrote letters to each other. So this section is recorded for the Criterion Collection exclusively in 2002. Johnny Depp reading selections from their written correspondence on camera. And he's kind of doing the Raoul Duke voice, which is kind of fun. But he's obviously just overjoyed to have this physical writing from a hero author, you know, like you would be blown away to have if you were such a fan of this guy, just to have this relationship with him, but to have his writing, which is what everybody loves. I mean, they love him, but here's a letter that's written to Johnny Depp. So he reads it in that voice, and there's a couple, I feel like they put like a quick pic of the date and the subject line up. Very entertaining stuff, fun to watch Depp read these and appreciate them. So that's about 14 minutes. Something called Hunter Goes Hollywood, which is about 10 and a half minutes long. Director Wayne Ewing apparently spent almost 20 years filming Hunter Thompson for his 2003 documentary Breakfast with Hunter, which I have not seen. And this is like a shortened excerpt from that footage, which follows Thompson on the set of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So you see him get off the plane, margarita in hand the margarita to the camera guy, step down, take the margarita back. And then, you see him on set, sitting next to Lyle Lovett, meeting with Harry Dean Stanton, who I feel like he knows. It feels like they've met before, which is not a surprise. And then talking to Johnny Depp. He gives sort of another section. He gives Johnny Depp like this tribal mask with like feathers on it. That's super weird, but an interesting and very seemingly Hunter S. Thompson kind of gift. And you see him interacting with Depp and Gilliam on set and stuff. So that's cool. That's a cool little bit to have. There's something called, after that, Not the Screenplay. And apparently there are many screenplay adaptations of the Hunter S. Thompson book. As you can imagine from that production history I listed, there's obviously several swings at adapting this book. So over the years, there were a lot of scripts, which ultimately resulted in a protracted dispute over who should have credit when Terry Gilliam's film was released. So presented here is an audio discussion of that dispute featuring Terry Gilliam, co-screenwriter Tony Grisoni, and producer Leila Nabolsi. And we get to hear them discuss this WGA dispute for about 17 minutes, which is cool. That behind the scenes, under the trunk kind of look at, credits and how, film nerds like me really rely on the IMDb to like claim authorship for a screenwriter or a filmmaker. And you just find out, especially in screenwriting, it's a very dicey area in terms of who gets credit. And, especially if it's a long running project, you may be giving credit to the wrong person ultimately, and you'll never know unless you read all the drafts, which I'm not enough of a nerd to do, honestly. So I like this kind of discussion. And then also included in this section is something called Dress Pattern, which is a 1-minute short that Gilliam made as this dispute was raging on. And this has optional Gilliam commentary, but it's basically a man addressing camera talking about how the film was made without the involvement of writers or something silly. And I just find it funny that he was like annoyed and bored and decided, I'm going to make a little short about this dispute. Okay, so then lastly, I think, well, not quite lastly, A Study in Marketing, which is, I think, tallies about 7 minutes total. And that is talking about the marketing for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and how challenging it was and how it didn't fit any of the conventional Hollywood categories and as such had to be sold in different ways. So presented here are the trailer, which also has commentary by Terry Gilliam, and 7 TV spots illustrating sort of the varied attempts to position the film in the mainstream marketplace. Gilliam only does commentary on the trailer, but he does go into detail about his idea for what the trailer should have been, and that is like an anti-drug film. Like there's an anti-drug film in Fear and Loathing. He wanted to make the trailer into an anti-drug film that's just like, parents, do not let your children see this movie, kind of thing. But Universal would not go for that, unfortunately, which I think would have been a pretty good trailer. And they also said that they were seen, I guess, as part of Universal's approach to some of this marketing is that they were seen as counter-programming to Godzilla, which they opened on the same day as Godzilla, which is crazy, and definitely, I'm sure, hurt this movie. And how, I guess, like I said, some of the TV spots or something are tailored to, this movie being counter-programming to that, whatever that means. Also included here are a selection of Terry Gilliam's storyboards on the film, including the opening sequence, the Mint Hotel, the Flamingo and the DA's convention, Adrenochrome, Duke drives Gonzo to the airport, and the final sequence. And then production designs, 47 seconds, basically flipping through illustrations that were executed by storyboard artists under the direction of production designer Alex McDowell. A stills gallery. This includes production stills taken by set photographer Peter Mountain, show the cast and crew at work on the film. Now, that's all the stuff under the film section. Under the source section, we have more supplements, which is great, including Oscar Zeta Acosta, Dr. Gonzo. Now, this is a 3-part section. Apparently in 1971, Oscar Zeta Acosta, who again was an activist attorney, a key figure in Chicano rights movement, joined his friend Hunter S. Thompson on a road trip to Las Vegas. Portrayed in the book as rip-roaring Dr. Gonzo, Acosta revealed here by his son Marco in a biographical photo essay. That's the first part. And through his own words, read on camera from his 1973 book, The Revolt of the Cockroach People, plus Thompson reading from a piece Acosta published in 1989. So those are the three parts. The photo essay, has his son's, like, some text he wrote and pictures of him and the book covers. And, it's, like I said, you'd breeze right through that. But it's cool. The reading section is the Revolt of the Cockroach People section. In 1974, Oscar Zeta Acosta appeared at the Festival de Flori Canto, a Hispanic literary gathering by the El Centro Chicano at the University of Southern California. And in this rare footage, he reads a chapter from the Revolt of the Cockroach People, which recounts his legal work and involvement in the Chicano rights issues. And that's about 30 minutes. It's about 29 minutes, 44 seconds. And when you see him on camera and you look at what Benicio did, there's a similar look there. It's pretty funny. It's pretty great. And also, I love that he's such a character in the reading, but also in the way he's dressed. He's wearing a mesh see-through short sleeve shirt to this reading, which is a really unique choice, I gotta say. And then lastly, the third part is Thompson on Acosta, and apparently in 1989, Oscar Zeta Acosta's son reissued his father's books, the autobiography of a Brown Buffalo, which you see the cover of in the photo essay section, and The Revolt of the Cockroach People, with an introduction by Thompson. And Thompson recorded for the Criterion collection a reading of him reading the introduction, basically. That's about 7.5 minutes. And it's very unrehearsed, so very shaggy, but enjoyable. And then there's a Ralph Steadman art gallery. Ralph Steadman, of course, is a British illustrator best known for his collaboration with Hunter Thompson. He does this crazy, wild artwork that's on the cover of Fear and Loathing, the Blu-ray, and on the book. There's a Mickey Mouse shirt that Tobey Maguire wears at one point. They were going to try and get him to wear a real Mickey Mouse shirt, but they couldn't clear it, so Steadman drew his own monstrous Mickey Mouse, and so you get to see that if you watch the movie. I should mention, I'll get back to that in a second. So this is a collection of drawings and color illustrations relating to Fear and Loathing that was provided to Criterion by Ralph Steadman. So that's another where you can flip through it, which is cool. And then lastly, there's something called Breakdown on Paradise Boulevard. And I didn't know about this, but apparently in 1996, Margaritaville Records released a spoken word CD of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, featuring Jim Jarmusch as Raoul Duke and Maury Chaykin as Gonzo, and Harry Dean Stanton as the narrator. So that may be where, at least one of the points where Hunter Thompson and Harry Dean Stanton connected. But presented here is an audio excerpt from that CD entitled Breakdown on Paradise Boulevard. This passage, also known as the taco stand scene, was never filmed for the Gilliam movie. It's about 7.5 minutes or so. Also features Glenn Headley and Laurie Metcalf as taco stand employees. But that's just cool that exists. And it's also interesting to hear Jim Jarmusch doing this voice. Like, he seems like a guy who could have directed this movie too, but not in the way that Gilliam may be better suited for it, just in terms of the style of it and stuff. The trippiness, the psychedelicness of it, if you will. Lastly, we have Fear and Loathing on the Long Road to Hollywood. In 1978, the BBC produced this feature-length documentary following Hunter S. Thompson and illustrator Ralph Steadman on a road trip to Hollywood. And that's about 50 minutes long. Starts with, Steadman getting off the plane and running into Hunter, driving a little VW Bug. And yeah, it's very interesting, intimate, perfect for this set, I think, right? So that's all that's there. And again, I don't think any of that stuff wasn't included on this Blu-ray, the original Criterion Blu-ray release. I'm pretty sure it's all there. Plus a booklet featuring an essay by critic Jay Hoberman and 2 pieces by Hunter Thompson. It is the same booklet in this version as there is in that one. So it's not like they redid the booklet. I'm just curious because what is Hoberman's essay begins as such. Hunter S. Thompson's journalistic prose poem Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas used a lost weekend in Las Vegas as a metaphor for America's season in hell. Dispatched by a national magazine to cover a cross-country motorcycle race, Thompson filled a postmortem on the 60s counterculture while reporting on his brain as though it were the dark side of the moon. As extravagantly subjective, linguistically rich, and outrageously bad-behaved as Fear and Loathing is, this lethargic tall tale, which was first published in Rolling Stone in late 1971, would seem to be problematic Hollywood material at best. But having taken over the project from Alex Cox, Terry Gilliam returned from the desert, bringing the multiplex nation a slapstick fever dream, both funny and poignant, as unencumbered in its performance as it is uncompromising in its worldview. Like a belated sequel to Easy Rider, Fear and Loathing opens with two guys in Hawaiian shirts, a red convertible, bombing Born to be Wild towards Nevada's neon Sodom. I didn't even think about it as a sequel to or slightly follow-up to Easy Rider, because it is so comedic, and while Easy Rider has funny moments, I never think of it as a comedy, but it's definitely in conversation with Easy Rider, so I like that he brings that up. Anyway, last thing I want to do is just compare it to this 4K from Arrow from last year. Again, I think I prefer the Criterion transfer, but I'm not going to get rid of this, and here's why. Let's see. Okay, so this has a commentary with Terry Gilliam. However, this is a new commentary recorded in 2019, I think, moderated by Phil Stubbs, or maybe it was. Maybe I'm misdating it, but it's definitely a newer commentary. It's not the same commentary that's on there, and that's it. It's got that one commentary. Then it has Savage, Finding the American Nightmare, an appreciation by film historian Ian Christie. This is exclusive to this disc. As is The Gonzo Papers, an interview with producer Leila Nabulsi. And Grim Memories and Bad Flashbacks, an interview with star Benicio del Toro, also exclusive to this disc. Ignore the Terrible Drug, The Art and Style of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a featurette including interviews with cinematographer Nicole Pecorini, production designer Alex McDowell, costume designer Julie Weiss, and editor Leslie Walker. So those are all exclusive to this. Now here's the thing I forgot to mention on here. We have 3 deleted scenes with commentary from Gilliam. This one says 4 deleted scenes. So there's maybe an additional scene here that I haven't compared which scenes are on what, but they all have commentary too. This also has Dress Pattern, which we mentioned in that one. Spotlight on Location, an original promotional featurette, interviews with Gilliam, Depp, and Del Toro. I'm sure that's studio-related press from the time, but I don't think it's on that disc. Trailers and TV spots. Now this has a collector's booklet featuring writing on the film by Roger Keane and the original production notes. So I mean, there's a lot here to be hung on to. So I would say if you're going one or the other, it's a tough call. You know, I like the movie enough that I'm going to keep both, but the Criterion package is pretty great. If you're going to get one, you wouldn't do wrong to pick up the Criterion, I think. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.